Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Amidst tens of thousands of federal workers recently getting fired, it's not rare because throughout their working career, layoffs hit 40% of Americans. How do you hedge yourself against the danger of losing your job? Then get a fascinating understanding of how you can use AI to improve your everyday life and some applications for AI in real estate investing today on Get Rich Education.
Since 2014, the powerful Get Rich Education podcast has created more passive income for people than nearly any other show in the world. This show teaches you how to earn strong returns from passive real estate investing in the best markets without losing your time being a flipper or landlord. Show host Keith Weinhold writes for both Forbes and Rich Dad Advisors and delivers a new show every week. Since 2014, there's been millions of listener downloads in 188 world nations. He has A-list show guests include top-selling personal finance author Robert Kiyosaki. Get Rich Education can be heard on every podcast platform, plus it has its own dedicated Apple and Android listener phone apps. Build wealth on the go with Get Rich Education Podcast. Sign up now for the Get Rich Education Podcast or visit GetRichEducation.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE. From Sunbury, Pennsylvania to Sun Valley, Idaho, and across 188 nations worldwide, I'm Keith Weinhold, and I'm grateful to have you with me here for another week. This is Get Rich Education. I'm known as the guy that, back in 2015, was the first person to explain how real estate pays you 5 distinct ways at the same time. When mass federal layoffs hit recently, you can learn something really important at a time like this. And no, it's not about the Washington, D.C. real estate market. That's not where I'm going here. That's not the bigger lesson, unless you're perhaps in the D.C. real estate market. It's shaping up to be tens of thousands of federal workers that are getting the boot as the result of the new administration in charge. We'll see where the number lands. But the thing is that federal jobs have long been deemed as the most secure, and yet more firings are coming. So if they're the most secure jobs, then what does that say about you and the safety of your job in both your near-term future and your long-term future, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector? I've worked in both sectors. And yeah, sadly, this is not such a rare occurrence. Many sources cite that roughly 40% of Americans get fired at least once during their working life. Job loss is more likely for a man than a woman, and it's happened to me. Yep, even I've taken that awkward and awful feeling, box full of desk stuff walk. The big lesson here is that you need to grow a second source of income. Experian and Fed data, they cite that the average debt per consumer is about $39,000 worth of student loan debt and another $24,000 worth of auto loan debt and another $6,500 worth of credit card debt. Well, those are not good debt types like real estate debt is, where you can outsource the debt to a tenant. Instead, you are the one that has to pay these type of debts. And that's why a lot of job losers are going to decline into a financial tailspin. They will default on their payments. They will become delinquent. They will descend into bankruptcy, and they will have a destroyed credit score. And the incidence of depression and suicide, that even goes up for these people. Now, as we know, most of the so-called financial advice out there, that targets budgeting, how to cut your expenses. That's okay, you can do a little of that. But if you lose your job, a bundled cell phone plan and ditching your $7 latte is hardly going to help you. See, here's the thing that a lot of people fail to realize. even if you get a promotion and a raise at work, it still only pads a dangerous single source. It's still just a sole income source. Instead, what's powerful is rather than budgeting, it is increasing your income, but it needs to be a source outside of your day job. That's how you get income diversification at the same time. I mean, you could take on a part-time job or freelance work and accomplish that. But see, the problem there is that you've lost your irreplenishable time. That's a one-way street. That time is never coming back. Don't live below your means. Grow your means. Owning an income property, that can completely solve all of these problems. Even a low-cost income property of, say, $200,000. And, okay, a property like this, that might start with just $100 to $300 per month of residual cash flow, but that amount tends to rise even faster than inflation because, as we know, your mortgage payment stays fixed. That's how that happens. And additionally, your $200K property, at just 5% annual appreciation, that grows to $255K in just 5 years. And if you only made a 20% down payment of $40K on this, well, that property, that grows to over $100K of equity in 5 years because you've got both the appreciation and the tenant-made loan pay down. There is more to this. Besides increasing your monthly income, you can often take a chunk of this $100K plus equity with a cash out refinance. That is a tax-free windfall event. You heard that right. Tax-free. And you still get to hold on to the property. So a simple, low-cost $200K property, just one of those, it increases your income now. It gives you a second source of income, and it simultaneously gives you a leveraged windfall chunk that you can access in one nice tax-free cash lump. And one thing's for sure, you want to get a loan for income property and get that property now while you have your job. Because when you lose your job, again, 40% of the time, no mortgage underwriter will qualify you when you're unemployed. Relying on one income source, that is kind of like playing Jenga on a wobbly-legged table. So, really, the bottom line here is that widespread federal job firings, they have really brought to light how many people are vulnerable with just one source of income. Why would anyone do that? Owning investment property solves the problem. Plant that second income seed now. You can't have just one income stream. That is too close to zero. That is precariously close to zero. And much of your life's thought pathways, they're about expectations, your expectations for the future, the way you think about your future. And if there's even a looming threat of losing your job in the future, that might not happen, but just the mere threat of losing your job, that can induce stress. So that's why you want to do something about that. And I have a great resource to share with you shortly that me and the team here at GRE are going to help you with in you getting that vital income diversification, a second source. But first, tax day is next month. If you aren't getting an extension, you're going to be pulling your tax documents together. Trump tax changes are anticipated anytime here. The highest federal income tax rate is expected to stay at 37%. The standard deductions are moving up soon, indexed to inflation. $15,000 if you're single, $30,000 if you're married. Basically, this means that things like your donation receipts, you know what? They are not worth saving and tracking unless they exceed those standard deduction amounts. And I like easy ways to remember things. As you're pulling together documents for your tax preparer, if you are the tax preparer yourself, A W-2 form shows income from your employer. A 1099 form shows income that's not from an employer. Really, that's the distinction and an easy way to remember it. And to my point earlier about having more than just one vulnerable source of income, I hope that your 1099 income, not from an employer, like the rents that your property manager collected for you, that those 1099s are increasing faster than your W-2 income, which is from an employer. America's first car-free neighborhood. I sent you more about that in our newsletter recently, and you said that you really liked learning about it. Yes, America's first car-free neighborhood. It's had its share of detractors and skeptics and supporters since it broke ground in 2021. These are largely rental apartments in Tempe, Arizona, that is just east of downtown Phoenix. Residents get around with light rail and e-bikes. Studio apartments start around $1,300 a month and 3-bedroom units around $2,700. You can meet your neighbors more and get to know your community when everyone's not in their car and garage bubbles. So I found this really interesting. One resident of America's first car-free neighborhood said, "We've probably made more connections here in 6 months than when we lived in the suburbs for 15 years. That was interesting to learn about in our newsletter. Coming up on the second half of the show today, an expert guest and I are talking AI. Think about all the time that this is going to save you. Think about all the brain damage that this is going to save you. Think about how much better informed you're going to be and how much smarter you'll feel. That's coming up shortly. Hey, with what I mentioned earlier, I am announcing that coming up in just a couple weeks here on March 20th, it is our live online event for an amazing Cleveland cash flow opportunity. And why Cleveland now? Well, healthy real-world monthly rents are more than 1% of home prices. That is a lucrative ratio. And on top of this, we are layering the BRRRR strategy, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat, where cash flow averages more than $500 per door. This strategy, it allows you to put fewer dollars in the deal, and that's why it's really popular. Be sure to show up and learn more. Our last live online event was last year. It was for BRRRRs, and we had a record 538 registrants. We're going to examine single-family properties in C and C+ neighborhoods. Those are the investor sweet spots here. And besides learning about real estate due diligence and the Cleveland market, there will also be a buying opportunity. Yes, the BRRRR strategy, it allows you to invest with that low equity position. Yes, both investor advantage areas with the BRRRR strategy layered on top of it. It's the right opportunity for you if you need to build that second or third source of income. And besides all that, there's just the simple fact that amidst the well-known national undersupply of housing, entry-level homes like these ones in Cleveland, they are even fewer. That entry-level segment really has the scarce supply. I mean, you're going to own a scarce asset that everyone wants and needs. And this live event is one, of course, you can join from the comfort of your own home. It has 2 co-hosts. You're going to be joined by one of our terrifically qualified GRE investment coaches and one of our top partners who has helped investors create wealth and grow their portfolios for over 20 years. I know him. I've had dinner with him. You can register now at grewebinars.com. Again, it is March 20th. Our last one had 538 registrants. That was a record. Register while you can. It is open now at grewebinars.com. More next. I'm Keith Weinhold. You're listening to GRE. You know what's crazy? Your bank is getting rich off of you. The average savings account pays less than 1%. It's like laughable. Meanwhile, if your money isn't making at least 4%, you're losing to inflation. That's why I started putting my own money into the FFI Liquidity Fund. It's super simple. Your cash can pull in up to 8% returns and it compounds. It's not some high-risk gamble like digital or AI stock trading. It's pretty low risk because they've got a 10-plus year track record of paying investors on time, in full, every time. I mean, I wouldn't be talking about it if I wasn't invested myself. You can invest as little as $25K and you keep earning until you decide you want your money back. No weird lockups or anything like that. So if you're like me and tired of your liquid funds just sitting there doing nothing, check it out. Text FAMILY to 66866 to learn about Freedom Family Investments Liquidity Fund. Again, text FAMILY to 66866. Hey, you can get your mortgage loans at the same place where I get mine, at Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. They've provided our listeners with more loans than any provider in the entire nation because they specialize in income properties. They help you build a long-term plan for growing your real estate empire with leverage. You can start your pre-qualification and chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. Start now while it's on your mind at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Rich Dad Sales Advisor Blair Singer. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and above all, don't quit your daydream.
How do you really use AI? Can you believe if you have a question about anything in life, 90% of the time, it already makes more sense to ask ChatGPT than a human being? That's what my longtime friend says. He's with us today, and he hosts the terrific RE Tipster YouTube channel. Welcome into GRE, Seth Williams.
Hey, Keith. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Seth, you've been interested in AI for years. Tell us how your perspective has evolved over time.
A lot of people have pretty big variations in how much they use AI and how much they're even aware of it. Personally, I use it every day, like many, many times a day. ChatGPT is open almost all the time, and I use it for almost everything you can imagine. Like when I have a question about almost anything, it makes more sense to ask ChatGPT than it does to go talk to a human, because I can get direct answers. It's armed with pretty much all the information that's publicly available in the world. Is an incredible resource. And when I talk to people and I ask them like, hey, do you use ChatGPT? And they either say, what are you talking about? Or they say, yeah, I've used it once. It just hurts me. It's like, seriously? You have a superpower at your disposal here. You're not using it. It's kind of like what the internet was back in 1995 or something, where like some people kind of got it, but a lot of people didn't get it yet. It's pretty crazy when you can harness the power of not just ChatGPT, but all of this AI stuff that's available now. Like there's incredible, very powerful leveraging opportunity here.
I use it about every other day. I bet after talking to you, it's going to make me want to use it more. But yeah, the guy that cuts my hair, he's only 25 years old. He doesn't seem very familiar with this. But like you said, it's a lot like Google in 1995 to maybe 1998. Like people just didn't automatically think of Googling something. And it's beginning to get that way, I think, with using an AI like ChatGPT to answer your questions. Why don't you tell us about some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about AI?
Well, that's a good question. I guess it kind of depends on where they're coming from and what they are even aware of in terms of what it's capable of. But I know one thing I hear from time to time is people will say, well, I'm not a content creator, so I don't really have a use for that. Like it makes sense if you're like a blogger or a podcaster. And I guess the good thing is that they at least have some awareness of what it can be used for. But things like ChatGPT can be used by pretty much anybody who knows how to type on a computer or even speak to their phone. The ChatGPT mobile app, for example, I just love this thing. You do have to be a paying Plus member, which is $20 a month. That is a laughably inexpensive price for everything that ChatGPT could do for you, especially the mobile app. I can turn this thing on. I can use it as a camera to point to anything and have it give me insights and instructions on how to deal with this thing, whether it's a plumbing problem. I was just using it this morning. I had my phone set up on a tripod on my desk, pointed at Zapier, trying to figure out how to make two complex softwares work together. And I just had to speak to it in real time and ask it, this is what I'm trying to do. How do I do this? I don't get it. And it explained exactly what to do. And this was help that I could have paid a consultant money for, but it just came from this app. And all it has to do is just look at my screen and it understands all of it. It sees things that I don't see. I know people that use ChatGPT as the therapist. I've never done that, but I know of a lot of people that do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it gives them legitimate, useful feedback, and it's available 24/7. And it doesn't cost $100+ per session to talk to them.
You, the listener right now, are thinking about all the jobs that this is displacing, surely. But why don't we pull back and think about, now, Seth, if someone is completely new to AI, what's the first thing that they should try to use it for?
If you are a real estate person specifically, I don't know if everybody listening to this is necessarily, but as a real estate investor, the first thing I ever used it for was writing property descriptions for me. Like when I had a property I was trying to sell, I know there's a great way to explain this thing, but I don't really know how to do it in my own head.
Yeah.
And you can just feed it basic information about the property and say, hey, write me a beautiful, compelling property description that will make these things sellable and make people, respond with interest and that kind of thing. And just do that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's an incredible writer. It does a great job. Was your question about where do they start with ChatGPT? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, if one isn't familiar with it, where should they start?
Well, another thing you could do, daily use type thing. So something that I've used ChatGPT for, I've taken a picture of my closet in the different clothes I have to wear, and I send it to ChatGPT and say, hey, what should I wear today? Like, what different articles of clothing would you recommend that I pair together? You could do this with your cupboard. Say, hey, here's what I have in my cupboard. Tell me what I can make with this, and then give me the recipe to make it. You could do this at the drugstore. You could take a picture of the shelf and say, hey, I have a splitting headache. Show me what on this shelf will solve my problem right now and get rid of my headache. I've actually got this problem worse than most people, where I can be looking right at the solution and I don't see it. Like, it's right there in front of me, but I miss it. But ChatGPT doesn't miss anything. Like, if it's in the picture or even in the live vision camera, it's like a live video feed that you can point at anything, like, it will see it and it will point out stuff that you very likely are missing.
That's amazing. I haven't used its image capability that way yet. And really, that brings up, Seth, there are so many AI tools available, like an explosion these past couple years. How is a person supposed to decide which ones are worth using and which ones are not?
It's very true. There's a lot of stuff out there. It can be a little overwhelming. I can tell you, I've used ChatGPT, I've used Claude, I've used Gemini, I've used Grok, a bunch of different AI chatbots out there. They can all do some pretty amazing things, but if you just don't know where to start, like, I'll see if I can only have one of them, ChatGPT is what I would go to. I think part of that is just a level of familiarity. Like, I've just used it for so long now. It's like a comfortable old shoe, but it really is innovating at an incredible speed. And this AI boom has been happening for over 2 years now, and ChatGPT is still arguably at the top. I mean, they've done a really good job of staying on the bleeding edge of what can be done now. And ChatGPT is free, but if you pay for the $20 a month version of it, it just unlocks a lot more capability and usability. That's probably what I would do. But there's different Claude. I've seen this myself, and I've heard this from a lot of other people. If you're trying to, like, write a story, for example, Claude is actually a better writer than most things out there. So if that's what you're trying to do, like, go with Claude. If you want like a one all-purpose tool that can do pretty much everything reasonably well, that's what ChatGPT is, in my opinion.
Those are some great tips. And yeah, I thought it was pretty impactful last year when even when you do a Google search, at the top of that, there is now an AI summary before you see your conventional Google search sort of hits, which actually concerned Google advertisers for a little while. How about some of the most driest and esoteric reading that we can think of and how AI can speed that up and make it more interesting? Just say doing due diligence in real estate, like reviewing municipal regulations or zoning rules and property restrictions. How does AI help you there?
I've used it numerous times for that. It's perfect for that. For example, in the land business, one way that you can make money from land is by subdividing land. And one strategy within the subdividing business is to find properties that they're called exempt subdivides, which means that you can essentially do the subdivide and not get anybody's permission to do it. Like, you can just split it up and not ask anyone, and you can do it. But you can only do that if the size of the property is over a certain threshold. In Texas, I think it's 10.01 acres or higher. There's certain places, Michigan, that are similar. But you can figure this out by looking at the county and the municipal guidelines to understand what is that threshold, or does that threshold exist at all? You can find these PDFs from the county or the municipal website, upload it to something like ChatGPT or Claude, and just ask the question, like, how big does a property have to be before it's exempt from the subdivision rules? And it'll tell you. If it's in there, it can read through the thing in a matter of seconds and tell you what the answer is and where it found the answer. A very similar thing with like legalese and legal writing that's really hard for the average person to understand, probably by design. It can decode that for you. I've gotten this before. I've gotten really poorly written emails from people like electricians or even just...
I can't believe this would ever happen.
Exactly. They explain things using a lot of industry jargon and lingo, and I don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
And I can copy and paste that email into ChatGPT and just say, hey, I got this email from an electrician. I have no idea what this means. Can you explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old? And it does it, and it works every time. Where it's like, oh, okay, that's what you meant. I can just know that instead of having to respond to them and say, hey, can you reword that for me? I don't understand it. And then they reply, and it's bad again. And it goes back to this... a lot of questions that a lot of us have every single day. Historically, we've gone to people to ask those questions.
Sure.
And that's fine, but it wastes their time and it wastes our time, and we still might not get the answers we're looking for. But with things like ChatGPT, like, you almost certainly will get the answer you're looking for very quickly, and it doesn't waste anybody's time other than the time you have to spend asking the question. So it's a big 80-20 lever. You can get a lot more done without relying on the limits of humans to get the job done.
We're talking about how you can use AI in your overall life and in real estate a little bit too with Seth Williams. Well, you're such a good resource. You're really pretty pioneering in learning AI and helping you with problems and solutions in both your overall life and in real estate investing. So tell us by now, what are some of the most unexpected or just like totally impressive things that AI has helped you with, and how do you do that stuff?
That's a really long list, but the thing that I have been most impressed with as of late is something that both ChatGPT and Google Gemini can both do this now, kind of in different ways, but they can look at your computer screen and help you figure out all kinds of complex problems. Talked about this a little bit in part 1, but earlier this morning, I had my ChatGPT mobile app right here on my phone. I had it on a tripod pointed at my screen, and it was walking me through how to set up a couple new zaps on Zapier using webhooks, which just right there, I probably lost most people. It's just a confusing thing to figure out. I still don't fully understand it, but I was explaining my problem and what I was trying to do, and I could just talk for as long as I want until I'm done talking, and then ChatGPT chimed in, and in about 30 seconds, it solved my problem and told me exactly what to do. And Google has another way of doing this where it's actually like on your computer, like seeing your entire screen. And it kind of does the same thing where a voice talks back to you. It's amazing because I know how hard some of these things can be. They're the type of thing that would either make me give up and just not do what I'm trying to do, or pay somebody a bunch of money to come and fix the problem for me or stand over my shoulder. Either which way, it's not a great outcome. But with the help of these AI chatbots that can see everything going on, and they have basically all the knowledge in the world about how to solve the problem, they can do it really quickly and easily. And it's amazing. That's one of millions of different things you can do with ChatGPT.
Oh dear. If AI looked at my computer screen, the first thing they would probably tell me is to close half of the tabs that I have open.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. How are you personally using AI in your real estate investing business today?
Lots of ways, but one thing that has been particularly useful to me is the use of what's called custom GPTs, which basically just means you are training ChatGPT to respond to you in a very specific way based on certain instructions you give it. So every time you start a conversation, like, it already knows why you're there, what you're looking for, what assumptions you want it to make. One example of a custom GPT I've made is one that can very quickly analyze big commercial projects, like whether it's a self-storage facility or industrial outdoor storage. I've explained to it how I want it to run the numbers based on certain information I give it, like square footage and pricing and occupancy rates and that kind of thing. So I can basically feed it like 6 or 7 key pieces of information in 20 seconds. It can tell me, give me like a 1 to 10 rating based on this is a great deal, you should move forward, or this is a terrible deal, look the other way. And the reason this is a big deal is because the way I used to handle this was I had a giant spreadsheet and I would go line by line, filling in all these different inputs. And it would take me at a minimum like 30 to 45 minutes to get to the same place of understanding like, yes, this is good. I should keep going on this. Or no, this is a terrible deal. And it can just like look at a lot of stuff, a lot of data very quickly. And it's not like the final answer necessarily. Like you don't just blindly follow whatever it tells you to do, but it can just get to the bottom of stuff, or I guess get further to the bottom of stuff, wasting a whole lot less time. So, as a real estate investor, that's super helpful. And people in like banking and accounting and all this stuff, fields where like there are full-time analysts that look at this stuff all day long. And it naturally takes humans a lot of time to figure this stuff out, but AI can get there much faster.
Yeah, that is pretty remarkable. And it sounds like you're finding a pretty high degree of reliability and not getting what we call hallucinations in the AI world.
Yeah, that is sort of a developing thing. So hallucinations, it's definitely a real issue where basically we'll just make up stuff that sounds viable, but it's not right. And the only way you would really know that is if you knew better in the first place, which means why am I even asking the question if I already know the answer? So it was kind of an issue where ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini would just make stuff up. One of the ideas with some of the newer models that are coming out with, like O1 or O3 mini now is what they've got. They use a lot more logic in these models. And the difference is when you ask it one of these questions, and if it doesn't know the answer, it'll just say, I don't know.
That's a better answer than hallucinating. Yeah,
absolutely. And, at ChatGPT 4.0, it's kind of like the difference between if you hire a very polite VA on the other side of the world who's trained to be a yes man or a yes woman. Like they want to make you happy and they're going to tell you what you want to hear, whether it's right or not. Whereas, these more advanced logical models are more like your accountant, where it's like, I'm not here to impress you. I'm just going to tell you the facts and how things really are. I think depending on what you're trying to do, like there's certain situations where you'd want the more creative 4.0 version, other situations where you'd want the logical one. So if I'm trying to like do code or analyze numbers or do something where accuracy is very important, that's where I want to use those logical models. But if I'm like writing a story or song lyrics or whatever, and creativity is more important, that's when I'd want to do 4.0. So it's not that either one is like better or worse. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what output you want from it.
Sure. Part of this is knowing which tool to apply. There might be a grain of gratefulness that there are such things as hallucinations, right? I mean, it still takes you, a human being, thinking to confirm, does that answer make sense? And it's just simply a good idea, or could that be inaccurate? So the human component sounds like isn't completely displaced yet at this point. Starting probably more than 10 years ago, Seth, when people began to look for answers to everyday questions, oftentimes they would go to YouTube and they would just like to get their answer that way. Why is this faucet leaking or anything else, and watch a YouTube video about that. What's your process, though, for using AI to take a YouTube video and summarizing it and extracting key insights that way?
Well, there is a free Chrome extension called GLASP, GLASP, that I just use it this morning. I use it all the time.
I've heard of it.
It kind of sits on top of YouTube. So when you're on YouTube and you have this Chrome extension there, this little button appears and you can copy a transcript of the entire video and then take that and paste it into ChatGPT, and you can ask it whatever you want about what that video is about. You could say, summarize it in 1 sentence. Or you could say, does this video talk about this issue? And if so, where, or what does it say about it? You could say, take this video and turn it into a blog post for me. Literally, like whatever you can imagine that could viably come from that video, you could get that information from it. And that alone is amazing. And it kind of goes back to like, what is the purpose of this video? Or what is my question that I'm trying to get answered? Am I looking for entertainment? For example, I've been watching a lot of videos about guitars and guitar pedals and amps lately. I want to hear what this guitar sounds like. I kind of have to watch a video for that. Like a transcript's not really going to help me. ChatGPT's not going to help me. Like I just actually have to watch the video. So this doesn't totally render videos useless. It just depends on why you're watching it and what information you want to get and how can you get there faster.
This has been great. Seth, are there any last things that we should know about AI, whether that's misconceptions or making sure that we're using the right AI tools and avoiding the wrong ones? Any last thoughts, Seth?
If people are really interested in this stuff, I mean, there's plenty of places you can go online. This is a huge trending topic on YouTube, lots of good information out there. We actually put together a school community intended primarily for real estate investors and business people. You can find it at pulseinnercircle.com, Pulse, innercircle.com. We're talking about this stuff all the time. My friend Mike Balcom and I did a couple different courses on this stuff, like a guided course that was awesome. I mean, we even learned a lot of stuff going through the process, but it is a rapidly advancing area right now. And it has been ever since ChatGPT came out. Like every week, there's some huge new thing out there. It's something that's worth paying attention to because even like right now, it's incredible the stuff you can do. And interestingly, like most people aren't doing it. So if you are up to speed and educated on it, you've got a superpower that most other people don't know exists or aren't willing to learn.
That's a great point. If you just learn 1% of this, you're going to be ahead of the general population, and it's really easy to do. Seth, I've done some learning about AI myself. This has been a great chat. Thanks.
You bet.
Check out Seth's resources and his own RE Tipster podcast. Always love to chat with my man, Seth Williams. Super down-to-earth guy. And also, he does not look like a dork like you might think an AI expert would. Yeah, like I told Seth, the guy that cuts my hair is 25 years old. He's a SoundCloud music artist. He mentioned to me about how he writes his own lyrics for his music. I asked him how the results were when he asked ChatGPT to write his lyrics or write him some rhymes. He told me he never even thought of that. I couldn't believe it. So yeah, AI, it's just still not top of mind for people. The two platforms that I use the most are ChatGPT and Venice.ai. Last year, I told you about how you can turn any document into an AI podcast with Notebook LM, and you'll remember that I also played a minute or two of that AI-generated podcast right here on the show for you. You can book your travel with AI as well, have it put together in itinerary for you. Have you asked AI who you are? I hope that you've tried that by now. When I go to ChatGPT and ask it, who is Keith Weinhold? Let's see, is it accurate? Well, the answer starts with, Keith Weinhold is a real estate investor, author, and the host of the Get Rich Education podcast. Well, then it goes on for a few paragraphs. It goes on to say, he founded Get Rich Education, a platform that offers educational content through podcasts, blogs, and resources about real estate investing, personal finance, and wealth building. His teachings emphasize the benefits of leveraging real estate as a long-term wealth building tool while highlighting strategies to maximize cash flow and minimize risks. Okay, yeah, I would say that's accurate. No hallucination there. You can also ask ChatGPT, or an AI, of course, about your properties. In fact, I'm going to enter the address of one of my rental properties and ask it how much cash flow it generates. So, to skim the answer for you, it looks pretty accurate here. It says that it is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, single-family home with 1,344 square feet of living space. It shows the property was last listed for rent at $1,625 per month in March of 2024. Yep, that sounds right. Zillow's rent Zestimate estimates the current rental value at $1,898 per month, is what it says. Okay, and then here's what it says about the property's cash flow. Because I asked it about the cash flow. It writes, to determine the potential rental cash flow, consider the estimated monthly rental income of $1,898. Subtract operating expenses such as property management fees, maintenance, insurance, property taxes, and any mortgage payments. The resulting figure will represent the net monthly cash flow. All right, well, then it goes on with more info that's less interesting. Okay, so therefore, at least this basic question that I've asked it, ChatGPT, it cannot know my cash flow unless they know what my loan amount was and what the mortgage interest rate is and those sorts of things. But maybe another AI knows that, though I am not sure. Hey, coming up here on future episodes of the Get Rich Education Podcast, some well-known names that haven't been here on the show before, and another interesting upcoming episode down the road here is when a pastor is going to join me on the show here. This pastor is an expert in what the Bible says about money. You might be familiar with the Bible verse that says, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." Gosh, well, how does that make me feel about how the pastor and I's conversation is going to go here on a show that's called Get Rich Education? That ought to be super interesting, and I really look forward to that show. Now, even if you're not a Christian or you don't believe in the Bible, this is going to be a significant conversation because you cannot deny the Bible's influence. It is, in fact, the greatest selling book of all time. And even if it doesn't personally affect you, it does impact other investors around you and just billions of people across the world. What the Bible says about money coming up, which could have, I guess, some uncomfortable moments here in future weeks on the show, along with a lot of other great content. If you want to be sure that you don't miss that on your podcatching app, be sure to hit the follow button. Also, if you would please, simply tell a friend about the show. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.